4 o'clock in the afternoon as we approach rush hour here. He's going to be slowly approaching the 405 interchange here into the Irvine area, and we'll see what happens there. But this driver refusing to stop.
All right, Marla Tejas here joining Bob DeCastro to bring you this coverage of this police pursuit on the 73. Bob, you just mentioned the time of day, and sure, we are approaching rush hour, but right now we haven't seen any cars that he's been passing here. He's got the 73 open to himself, and of course, the scariest element about this pursuit is that this person behind the wheel is possibly armed. So that brings in another factor here for law enforcement as they pursue this driver.
There are reports that this driver might be armed. Just to recap here very quickly, a pursuit that we believe started somewhere perhaps in the Laguna Beach area. We're looking at a silver Mercedes and went southbound on Laguna Beach, 45 miles per hour through Dana Point, and then hopped onto the 73 going northbound there. And CHP cruisers now following very closely behind on an open 73 freeway through the Newport Coast area, approaching the 405 freeway. Let's bring in Dennis Zine, police specialist, to help weigh in on what's happening here and what's transpiring right now. Dennis.
Well, good afternoon, and what we have is another high-speed pursuit on the Southern California freeway. This particular chase, obviously on the freeway, we don't have the pedestrians, the cross traffic, etc. So the CHP is very, very effective in these pursuits. They will continually follow at a safe distance. They'll deploy additional units. Seldom will they use a pit maneuver because of the speed or the spike strip. They've got a number of vehicles chasing the suspect. What he's wanted for, I don't know, but I understand possible weapon, which obviously there's extreme caution with that. And then other agencies that surround that particular area will be notified, and ultimately additional units will be getting involved in this pursuit.
So yes, as we have a wider shot here, Dennis, this is Marla Tejas, by the way, just joining the coverage here. You can see now we got a clear shot of those SUV vehicles there. So that is CHP. CHP is in charge, the lead agency of this pursuit.
And what happens is when the CHP takes it over, they normally stay with that pursuit. The suspect may then transfer to surface streets and go through surface streets, jump back on the freeway, back and forth. But once the CHP is chasing, then they'll normally remain with that until it concludes. Again, the CHP has jurisdiction, every city throughout the state of California, every road, so that's what they'll do.
Dennis, I know you are watching this on delay here, just a little bit here. We have the location there, as you see on the bottom of your screen here. He is now transferred to the northbound 55 through the Costa Mesa area from the 73, so going past the Costa Mesa Irvine complex, just past the John Wayne Airport, and now looks like he's just gotten off of the exit here, Baker Street, and exited Riverside in Costa Mesa.
So we'll see them continue with this pursuit on the surface street, the CHP. I know there's an air unit overhead, probably an Orange County Sheriff's Department or one of those agencies in the southern part of the county that is given the air support. And obviously the air support is critical in a situation like this. So now when you transfer to a surface street situation, there's a lot of hazards. You've got the pedestrians, you got the bicycles, you've got cross traffic. So it really intensifies. But what it does afford the authorities the opportunity to use a spike strip or to use the pit maneuver, to utilize other techniques that they wouldn't utilize on the freeway. But then again, it increases the hazard, not only for the motorists, but as far as the general public.
Well, Dennis, we are in a much more precarious situation here because we had the 73, which is an open roadway there, not many cars around. And now we're going through the streets of Costa Mesa here, where it looks like mostly a business area, possibly a business complex, but we're dealing with a much more congested area with other cars around, possible pedestrians around, and certainly people who are still working at this hour.
Exactly. You've got driveways in and out of traffic, so there's a lot of hazard that you find on the surface street. And while the speeds may not be as great as on the freeway, the hazard to the general public increases just because of the fact is you've got the situation on the surface street that you don't have on a freeway. A freeway, you got cars, basically that's it, motorcycles. But on the surface street, you've got all kinds of situations, hazards that can then cause issues of crashes. And we've seen that many times during these pursuits where an individual suspect is going through a red light, going through a stop sign, broadsides a vehicle, No, we've covered many of those. So as this continues, he may be looking for a place. Oftentimes they want to bail. In this particular situation, there's really no place to bail because he's not going to get too far running.
Well,
and continually driving in this fashion in this area. Maybe jump back on a freeway, but what the officers will do is continue to follow at a safe distance. And again, the CHP is very, very aggressive in these pursuits to bring these to an end as quickly as possible.
All right, as he's approaching the intersection here, Dennis, we're getting a little bit more information. This started, we know this in Laguna Beach, but in the downtown area, and it was a fail to stop trying to arrest this person on a no bail warrant.
Right, so it appears that he perhaps was a parolee and is wanted, and they were trying to arrest this individual in the downtown Laguna Beach area, and he just got in this car and took off. By the way, Red Hill Avenue in the Costa Mesa area, this is very close in and around the John Wayne Airport, and continues to circle just about that area. So continues to move and not stop with the police following him on these surface streets.
Though, Dennis, I would say that on these surface streets, he's not driving too erratically.
No, he's not. His speed is definitely not excessive. That obviously is in favor for safety of the public, but nevertheless, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts going through red lights and stop signs. And if he is hot and he's been through the criminal justice system, doesn't want to go back to jail or prison, then he'll do whatever he can to escape. But his speed is not excessive. But again, you've got multiple units, and that's what they'll do is as they continue on the surface streets, additional units will then join that pursuit. They want to bring this to an end as quickly as possible. But the concern that we have is for the general public. There's a lot of hazard, great hazard for the general public, whether they're in a car, motorcycle, bicycle, pedestrian, when you're on the surface street. So
well, this is especially scary. Here we see he's still around the Red Hill Avenue near McCormick Avenue, now Airport Loop. Again, still near the John Wayne Airport, driving around that area. But this is especially troublesome for officers, Dennis, because we're talking about a parolee here who is refusing arrest or to be taken into custody, and now he gets in a car, is talking about that he's possibly despondent and possibly armed. So when this car does stop eventually, or is stopped, you're dealing with a situation here where you have a possibly armed individual. Now we see going through this intersection at Main Street and Anaheim, and all of the cars stop there as it goes through the intersection, and he simply barrels through the intersection.
And what you'll see is this driving pattern is extremely hazardous, extremely dangerous for the general public. Again, it intensifies the concern for the officers, for their safety, as well as the general public, if this individual does have a weapon. And it would not be unusual for an individual in this particular situation fleeing that they want to take into custody to have a weapon. Again, they've been through the criminal justice system and they don't want to go back, so they'll do whatever they can to elude the capture and to try to escape. And this is exactly what we see happening right here, unfolding on television right now on Fox 11.
And here he is just making a right turn, perhaps on off of MacArthur Boulevard or onto in the Irvine area. Dennis, you mentioned that CHP, once they take over the pursuit, then they continue the pursuit, and they do so in a more aggressive manner. So what is the strategy at this particular point?
Well, the strategy is to follow a safe distance, to have sufficient backup, and what they'll do is work with the local agencies. But the concern is to get this individual into custody as quickly as possible. And as we see coming up on this particular hour, as we see coming up on 4 o'clock in the afternoon, where people will start leaving work, they want to bring this to an end. So they will do it in a cautious manner, but they are aggressive. They don't do a tracking mode as often as you see local agencies go into a tracking mode, utilizing the helicopter, keep surveillance, and the units back off, turn off the siren red lights, and go into tracking mode. CHP, they will utilize techniques. They want to see this consequence. They want to see it end as quickly as possible. So when I talk about being aggressive, they're much more aggressive than I see local law enforcement, whether it be the LAPD, the sheriffs, or any other agency. They want to bring that to a stop, and they see the carnage on the highways all the time when these individuals get involved in a crash and innocent people are injured and killed. So this individual, again, not just a pursuit, but a pursuit because the person's wanted for some criminal activities.
The driver continues to go on in and around the the John Wayne Airport area, MacArthur Boulevard now, and campus. You see him going right on the wrong side of the street here. A suspect wanted on a probation violation. It started in downtown Laguna Beach when they tried to make some sort of a stop or an arrest on this individual, got into the car, this silver Mercedes, and continues to drive around the John Wayne Airport area. We want to remind you we have this new technology here that you're looking at, so stick with us as we go through this pursuit. And you can see that the suspect is now driving on Campus Drive, and there you see some of the speeds as well, 40 to 45 miles per hour, perhaps 50 miles per hour, as it continues to drive around this area and will not stop from this clip. And it does look like that this individual could possibly be armed. At least we know that he is communicating with officers and refuses to stop. Now on Campus Drive and Dove Street in Central Coast, in the Costa Mesa area.
And we would speculate that if an individual is fleeing, as we see the situation, and they're wanted for some type of criminal violation or parole or whatever the case may be, that possibility is they would be armed. It's not unusual for an individual that's fleeing to be armed. So again, intensifies the hazard to the officers, so they have to use extreme caution. And what we'll see is they will then work with the local agency. If the local agency, and most of them in this region, have SWAT teams, they'd be mustering up the SWAT team officers if this comes to a barricaded situation, a standoff, because they obviously don't want to get shot. If the individual does have a weapon, then it's possible that they would use that weapon on the officers. So there's a lot of factors that come into this situation. Since they know the individual who they're looking for, they know what he is, they're not going to let him cause harm to them or anyone else. But again, he wants to get away. He wants to get away as quickly as possible. And as the traffic we see, a lot of streets, wide streets, no vehicles parked on the roadway, so you reduce some of the hazard for vehicles traveling in and out. But nevertheless, this pursuit with this suspect who's wanted for some crimes is obviously going to continue with this and not surrender in a peaceful manner.
Well, it's interesting that he's sticking with, I know he's had a couple of opportunities to get back onto a freeway, but he is sticking with those surface streets. This is in, now it says, according to our new technology here, the Newport Beach area, specifically just from Irvine. This is southwest Birch Street now, passing Orchard Drive there in Newport Beach. So we have been sticking with this for the last 15 minutes or so, and it started when we picked it up on the 73 freeway. So again, back to these surface streets where this suspect continues to seemingly drive. I don't want to say in circles, but
well, it did actually. If as we've been tracking this driver, as he got off the 73 and then onto the 55 and into the John Wayne Airport area, he did a full circle, pretty much around the John Wayne Airport.
Right.
But continues actually not driving at an extremely high rate of speed. It looks like he's pulling over. Oh, no, that's another car that just pulled over. And he continues on. But he's been driving at not a high rate of speed here. We were looking at maybe 40 miles per hour, 45 miles per hour on surface streets, and then 50, 60 miles per hour perhaps on the 73 freeway. But the driver does not stop at this point. It looks like his path has been very circuitous. It hasn't had any sort of any particular direction that the driver is going, so it would be hard to just drop a spike strip anywhere, not knowing where the driver is going. But perhaps if the driver, Dennis, is going at this 40 mile per hour speed, if it's to slow down, he's to slow down just a little bit more, they might be able to do some sort of a pit maneuver.
Well, absolutely, a pit maneuver or pre-deploy for a spike strip. In the speeds this individual is traveling, they're both possible. They can utilize either of those techniques to bring it to a stop. Again, you're in a Mercedes. Is it a stolen car? Is it his car? How to get in that car? He's stating he claims he has a weapon. He's armed. So a lot of those factors come into play. But the issue is now they want to get him into custody. They will do whatever is reasonable and prudent and safe to bring him, to put him into custody, take him into custody. So this is not a high-speed pursuit. It's a pursuit, a wanted individual. They know what he's wanted for. He's just clocking up more charges as he's attempting to flee the Highway Patrol and the local authorities, and they'll continue following. But you notice traveling, he's not going excessive speed on the road that he's traveling. He's not driving the wrong side of the roadway, as we see sometimes in these pursuits. So Hopefully he'll come to his senses if he's communicating on cell phone with the officers or anyone else, encouraging him pull over and stop, bring this to an end, because all he's doing is compounding the charges against him, and he'll get additional sentencing because of what he's causing for himself by trying to flee and creating a hazard for the community.
And of course, law enforcement always takes into consideration the public safety first and foremost. And I say that because he just wound his way through clearly a residential area, plenty of homes that he just passed. Fortunately, there was really no one out and about. So that, of course, is a good thing. Now he's heading southeast on Bristol Street here and Bayview Plaza in Newport Beach, seemingly picking up speed right here as our chopper just kind of loses it right there. But we'll get a better view of this silver Mercedes. So if you're just joining us, this is a pursuit that started in the downtown Laguna Beach area. This is a parolee wanted on a probation violation and has been eluding officers for about, I would estimate, about 30 minutes by now, and has made his way into the Irvine area, Costa Mesa, and currently in Newport Beach.
And as we see, the roads are relatively light with traffic. We don't see a lot of parked vehicles along the roadway. I know they have a lot of parking restrictions in Orange County. We don't see in other parts of Southern California. But his driving pattern is not really as bizarre as we've seen in the past, wrong side of roadway, et cetera. So while he's driving in a manner that is very reasonable for this particular traffic and this particular time of day, still he's wanted for some serious charges. And him claiming that he is armed, it could be anything he's armed with, whether it be an automatic, revolver, whatever the case may be. And you always assume if they're armed, they have a gun or some type of a gun, not a knife, but some other type of weapon that obviously could be deadly. Again, we have the air unit that's overhead. If it gets to the point where the air unit has to back off, then it causes more hazard for the officers. But that air unit that they utilize keeps communication with the officers on the ground in pursuit. And again, with this particular situation, you've got one of the CHP divisions involved, and they will be communicating with the local agencies that are involved. And we have different communities that they'll be driving through. So all those communities are going to get involved with their law enforcement personnel.
And now we should tell our viewers where this is located now. You can see there on your screen again with our technology there. You can see it's on Jamboree Road and Bison Avenue. So the driver has now gotten onto Jamboree, a very busy thoroughfare. It appears that he's going now southbound on Jamboree from the John Wayne Airport area down into the Newport area, right past UC Irvine, and then down into the Newport Center area, very busy area, beautiful area there along the Newport coast. And very shortly we'll be approaching once again PCH. So could potentially just wrap around again, back down onto PCH toward the Newport Beach Laguna area, but continues on here, Jamboree Road and Bison Avenue. Again, this suspect, we believe, could be armed, is communicating with officers, obviously refuses to stop, and is wanted on a warrant, and did not stop for police officers earlier this afternoon in downtown Laguna Beach.
And we can assume it's a felony warrant for some type of serious charge. You got misdemeanor warrants in this particular situation. I'm sure it's a felony warrant for some type of felonious activity, and that could range from anything. But when you're involved in a felony situation, that means you'll be going to state prison once you're convicted. So this individual's been to that situation, been through the criminal justice system. He knows what he will experience, and obviously doesn't want to do that again. So let's try and flee from the authorities, and that's what we see happening.
Well, the other interesting element, and we're showing this on our banner here, that's the suspect is in contact reportedly with the police, claiming that he is armed. So what's that contact like between law enforcement and the suspect? Oh, it looks like, pardon me, go ahead.
What they're trying to do is, if they're communicating, encouraging him to pull over and stop and comply with the officer's directions. If they are communicating with him, encouraging him, don't compound this, don't make this any worse than it is. It's time to pull over and stop and surrender. And they'll treat you with respect. They'll put the handcuffs, take you to jail. But the fact is, you're creating a hazard not only for yourself, but for everyone around you. But if he's communicating, they're encouraging with a hostage negotiator or someone of that caliber to decide, hopefully have him decide it's time to end this.
All right. This is, by the way, a very busy area because now it's Jamboree Road near Santa Barbara Drive. This is very close to the Fashion Island area. There you see the Colony apartment homes there. So going into a very busy, well-traveled area where there are lots of people who are shopping, lots of people work around here. A very busy area. We're going to continue to watch this, and we're going to hand it over to Alex Michelson and Christine Devine. They're inside the studio as we continue to watch this pursuit that, again, began in Laguna Beach in the downtown area. Police continue to follow the suspect now in the Newport Center area. Alex?
Bob and Marla, thank you for your coverage, and it is now 4:02. I'm Alex Michelson, and you are watching breaking news coverage of a police pursuit. This is a suspect who we believe may be armed, or at least is telling officers that he is armed, in contact, wanted for a no bail warrant. We are now in the midst of Orange County, in the middle of Newport Beach. Dennis Zine continues to join us on the phone, and Dennis, the challenge in going to an area, Bob just mentioned, we're near Fashion Island, we're near a whole lot of residential neighborhoods. The challenge in this situation as compared to being on the freeway?
Well, multiple ways for him to escape, to elude capture. Again, the speeds in this particular pursuit are not excessive. His speeds have been very moderate, whether he's on the freeway or on the surface street. But in this particular case, where you've got residential, you got business, you got areas where he can jump out and go into a foot chase with the officers, that's one of the concerns. The freeway situation, you're traveling with traffic. Traffic so far has been light, but it compounds the matter when you're on a surface street because there's so many areas that the individual can utilize to escape, bailing from the car, running in or going to a parking structure, all kinds of situations that prevail. But it's easier on a freeway because you don't have any impediments. You just have the traffic on the road and nothing else. So in this case, this individual decides, and if it's a no bail warrant, it means it's a very serious felony charge when you have a no bail warrant. So this individual knows the consequences, but as far as for the officers, the hazard on the surface street is much greater than it is on the freeway, not only for the suspect, but also for the officers and the general public. So what we have now is the compound factor, been on the freeway, off the freeway, now you're in a heavily populated industrial, commercial, residential community. Again, with these speeds so slow, it wouldn't surprise me if he'd bail from the car and take off on foot.
Why not employ a spike strip or something else in this situation where he is going so slow?
Well, they could. This is an ideal location, ideal situation to deploy. And now what you need to do is pre-deploy. You need to get ahead of the individual, find out what anticipated road they're going to be on, and then you deploy the spike strip from that location. So it puts the officers in some jeopardy because they're deploying that from the side of the road, whether it be the sidewalk, the parkway. You're not going to do it on a freeway. The pit maneuver, this is an area they could do a pit maneuver. Is it his car? If it's his car, registered to him. Is it a stolen car? All those factors come into play. Do we want to do a pit maneuver on a victim's car? Probably not, but they want to bring this to an end. And again, these speeds are relatively slow, as we've seen many pursuits here on Fox 11 over a period of years. So he may be looking for a place to bail, but it's not one of these pursuits where they're going unreasonable speeds, whether it be on the freeway or on the surface street. And it looks like you could deploy, you could pre-deploy a spike strip. Most law enforcement agencies utilize them. They do it on a freeway occasionally, but the freeway is not real practical. But on the surface street, it's relatively easy. So they could actually deploy, or they could do a pit maneuver with this particular situation with what they have to face with.
Well, we're seeing them go underneath this parking structure here in Newport Beach. And as we had that aerial shot there from Skyfox, you could see at least, 5 CHP officers trailing him, Dennis. And you talk about the fact that you need to get ahead of this guy in order to make that spike strip happen. So we can only assume that in fact is what is happening with law enforcement as they are in contact with this suspect.
Right. Well, they probably don't know what street he's going to be proceeding, but what they can do is anticipate and then deploy units to those locations, because as he approaches, then they put that spike strip in the roadway and pop, then the tire goes, and then car comes to a stop and they take him into custody. But if we know what street he's going to be on, if it's a long street, you don't have intersecting roadways, And what we see happening is he was on the freeway, now he's on the surface street. We're not going to deploy on a freeway, we'll deploy on a surface street. But that will be coordinated between the local agency and the California Highway Patrol that we will deploy the spike strip at this particular location. And we talk about pre-deploy. The officers have to get ahead of the individual that they're following. So units would have to get ahead of him, around him, somehow get ahead of him, and then deploy that as he then passes them. So while the units are following, they're in normal pursuit procedure. To deploy the spike strip, you've got to get ahead of that car, and that has to take some time for them to deploy. Again, maybe we have 6 or 7 cars, so sufficient units to utilize a spike strip if that's the case. But in this case, these apparently armed, they're concerned about that. You got a no-bail warrant. That's a concern. That's a very serious crime this individual is wanted for. So those factors are all taken into place. But the lead unit, the California Highway Patrol, will be communicating with the local agency, and the supervisor in charge will be communicating and deciding what factors they're going to employ for this particular situation to bring this to an end.
We've heard that he's in communication with police. What is that conversation like? What are police trained to say in the midst of a pursuit?
Well, normally the individual has a cell phone. They're communicating. They're speaking. The officers are deployed. We have the hostage negotiators. We have people who are trained to communicate with individuals. But normally in a pursuit, the individual, if they're on a phone, they're on the phone with a friend. They're on a phone with someone who they're familiar with. If somehow he called the police or the police had the phone number and contacted him, and they have a dialogue. It's time to give up. It's time to pull over, surrender, put this to an end. Because all you're doing is compounding the charges. If this individual's got a no-bail warrant, we can assume he's been to the criminal justice system and maybe been to prison, so it wouldn't surprise that he doesn't want to go back and do whatever he can to avoid that. But the officers themselves that are trained for that will try to make sense and reasonableness. If you have a weapon, don't come out with the weapon. Leave the weapon in the car. Put your arms out, do what you're supposed to do, comply with the direction of the officers, and go into custody, and let's sort this out. But we're not going to sort it out by having this chase. All you're doing is making it more difficult and more serious for yourself, because whatever charge you have on the no-bail warrant, you got a whole new set of charges that are now being racked up against you. So that doesn't help him in the situation when he's going to face the judge, ultimately face the judge, and the judge will take all this in consideration.
Given the time, Dennis, it's Wednesday afternoon, just after 4 o'clock. I'm surprised at how empty this area is, considering this location. He's basically circling the Fashion Island Mall here in Newport Beach. This is specifically Newport Center Drive near Santa Maria Drive. We've seen him make several basically roundabouts here. And yet there hasn't been a lot of traffic, not a lot of pedestrians, which is, of course, great news considering that we are in a pursuit.
Well, it's very light, but it wouldn't be surprising. Maybe he's surveying the area to decide where he wants to bail, that he's looking for a location that he thinks is comfortable to bail from the car and go into a foot chase. That might be the possibility, because the officers are closely following. This is not what you would consider a high-speed 60, 70, 80-mile-an-hour pursuit, which we've seen in the past. These speeds are very moderate, whether it was on the freeway or the surface street. So while he's driving in a safe manner as far as the speed goes, the officers take that in consideration, but he may just be surveying the area to find out where he's going to bail. And if he's got a no-bail warrant, then he might have that opportunity. I'm going to leave the car and take off on foot and, take my chances, because if the hostage
Dennis, it appears that he may have been chosen to bail here. He's now pulled into a parking spot. The question is what is he going to do? Is he going to get out of the car here? We are awaiting his next move as officers are there. It's not clear if any of those folks around him are in their cars as well. And now we are in a standoff. You see police officers that have gotten out of their car, and our suspect is still in his car. And
we're dealing with a parolee who is reportedly armed, so this makes this even more precarious, Dennis.
Exactly. So what the officer will do is deploy around the vehicle. They'll secure that area. Again, you've got a concern about pedestrians. You've got people who return to their vehicles, so you've got to make sure they're safe. So they will deploy around that car. You've got to make sure you don't have crossfire with the officers who are deploying. Again, you've got multiple agencies, so you've got to make sure the coordination with the different agencies. So there's a lot that comes into play now, since he's in a parking spot. It doesn't look like he's going to leave that parking spot, but now somehow they need to encourage him to leave that car. As we know, there's local police along with the California Patrol And the techniques and the procedures are real simple. Let's get him into custody as safely as possible, as quickly as possible. They do have a canine. The canine obviously is very effective, and if they need to deploy the canine, that will also help. If he does have a weapon, if he has a gun, we don't know what he's going to do with that. We just hope that that's not the case. But now he's got himself in a position where he's come to a stop. He has two options: surrender or get out and run. But there's not many other options, because the way he's surrounded by the police cars, he's not going to be able to take off again. So this driving activity has come to an end. So he's not going to plow through them. And what will happen is the standoff trying to communicate with him to get out of the car and to surrender.
Yeah, last week when we were on another pursuit and the windows were heavily tinted, we talked about the fact that that's illegal and that poses challenges for police. And it looks like this driver's windows, front windows, are heavily tinted, which makes this more challenging for the police that are there.
They can't see in. They can't see in. He can probably see out. They can't see in. So the way they deploy, they have to make sure they don't have a crossfire. If he has a weapon and he starts shooting at them, they have to make sure that's safe. They have to make sure there's no pedestrians in that vicinity that could be struck by a bullet, or if this individual has another weapon. There's no telling. It's a big question mark. The bottom line is you have a hot suspect, no bail warrant. He's now in a car, stopped in a parking lot, and how are you going to take him into custody in a safe manner? Protect yourself, protect your partner, and protect the general public, as well as not cause any harm to the individual who is involved in this pursuit that's now come to an end, and now the standoff. And this is not uncommon. But if he does have a weapon, they believe he has a weapon, it may be an opportunity to call in the SWAT team with their equipment to take him into custody, because the officers really aren't equipped with the windows darkened to approach that vehicle in a safe manner without other equipment to dispose of, to make their entry safe, to make their approach safe. They don't have a lot of that equipment in the police vehicles, the Highway Patrol, or the local agencies.
How does the fact that he has said that he may be armed change the thought process for officers right now?
Well, the thought process, this man has a weapon, and this weapon can be used to shoot me or someone else. You know, he could come out of that car and start shooting and seeing where he goes and take off on foot. And you have to make sure you don't have crossfire. So you want to make sure that the officer deployed properly where there is no crossfire. So they're going to be behind the vehicle, to the side of the vehicle, but they're not going to be in front of the vehicle. You don't want to have a crossfire. And the crossfire means as you're shooting, or he's shooting, we want to make sure that we're all protected and that the general public is protected. It just increases the hazard for everyone. So when there's a possibility of an individual in the car, the suspect having a weapon, there's no telling if that person is going to come out of that car shooting away. If he has an automatic weapon, God knows what can happen with that. So there's all factors that come into play. Or it could be a revolver. It could be a six-shooter. It could be a semi-automatic. All types of possibilities. But if there's a weapon, a gun, you're talking about a deadly force situation if he comes out shooting at the officers. Again, we want to keep the general public. As we see the general public's away from this, now they have to also cordon that area off and keep the general public away. People have their cars parked. They want to get to their car. They won't be able to do that until this individual is taken into custody. This is going to be a static situation until this individual is taken into custody. So it just increases the hazard for the general public, increases the hazard for the officers. It may be time to call in the SWAT team, have the SWAT team take over, and they have the equipment they can approach and get the individual out of the vehicle in a safe manner.
And of course, this should also be noted, the fact that this suspect is a parolee, so he's no stranger to criminal activity, to law enforcement.
Exactly. And when you go to prison and you get paroled for whatever the charge was, you don't go to prison unless it's a very serious charge. And you get paroled, that means you're supposed to be on good behavior and not commit any crime. So he's already racked up some more charges by this pursuit, by not cooperating, and you're supposed to subject yourself to search by police. So there's a lot of factors that come into play that will definitely increase the problems for this individual when he goes to court. I mean, he's at the point right now where it's a standoff. The chance of him getting away is slim to none.
And Dennis, what about the fact that when he initially pulled over and he parked next to the car on the upper part of your screen there, and then he obviously reversed and positioned his vehicle, this silver Mercedes, so that it is literally facing the deputy or the law enforcement's vehicles.
Right. Well, who knows what that was for? But there's no way with the surrounding by the units that they have there, at least half a dozen units. And remember, those officers have armament. They have shotguns. They have rifles. They have all types of armament. You don't want this to turn into a shootout. They just want to take him into custody peacefully and let him go through the criminal justice system. If he's wanted by the court, you got a no bail warrant that's issued by the court, he's going to have to surrender himself one way or another. But if he comes out shooting, that's basically committing suicide, because you got a lot of officers there who have weapons, and they will not hesitate to fire back when their life's in jeopardy if this individual comes out and wants to engage in a gun battle. I mean, you have one individual with a weapon, whatever kind of weapon he's got, and you got a number of officers also with weapons. And the officers outnumber the individual. We assume he's by himself in that Mercedes. So this is a very, very serious situation where you have the standoff. Again, the officers really don't have the equipment to approach that vehicle in a safe manner in their car. That's why I think it would be appropriate what we see happening right now, unless he wants to surrender. And they maybe ordered him out of the car. He's not complying. So it's time to call in special equipment, and that would be the next step, would be calling in the SWAT team. Again, there is a canine, but the canine's not going to do much good when the windows are up and the car door is shut.
Well, we're seeing a lot of activity with positioning of the police officers down below there, and of course their guns drawn, their weapons are out. What's the communication like? Are they verbally speaking, shouting literally to the suspect inside the vehicle? How does that work?
Well, there'll be one officer who will be communicating. You're not going to have 5 or 6 officers yelling different orders. You're going to have one officer communicating with the suspect that's in the vehicle. You'll have other officers who are backup. You'll have a supervisor who's given direction. And if I was in charge of that particular situation, this would be the time to call in for the SWAT team. You have a suspect who possibly is armed. You have a pursuit. There's a standoff now. You're not going to jeopardize the officer's safety by approaching that vehicle. While the officers have protective armament, there's no telling what kind of weapon this individual has. And if he's a parolee, he's been to the criminal justice system, we don't need to cause hazard to the officers that are there trying to take him into custody in a peaceful manner. So as we see this happening, this unfolding, it may extend and continue until the SWAT team arrives and they have the special equipment that they can approach and they can take him into custody in a safe manner. But again, they have armament, they have protection that the uniformed officers in the patrol cars don't have.
And we just noticed that one of the officers just parked in that parking lot right there, so to have a sort of an aerial view of this suspect, just another perspective and another form of protection for the officers.
Exactly. And the individual, the suspect, the parolee with the no bail warrant, he could jump out of that car right now and take off. He could come out with a weapon, take a couple rounds, and then take off. There's no telling. It's right now, as we see this unfolding, there's no telling what the outcome is going to be. There's all kinds of possibilities. But the officers have to conduct themselves according to the procedures, according to the rules. In the old days, many years ago, you may have seen them approach the car, a shootout takes place. That's not going to be the case. They will hold back. They will call in what resources are necessary in order to take this person into custody. And I'm sure they're giving him orders. He's not complying. We know that he's, again, no bail. He said he has a weapon. Well, that's enough in my case to say it's time to call in the people who have the ability to take him into custody and have the equipment in order to protect themselves and the general public. So the people that have cars parked around there, all those folks are going to have to wait until this incident is successfully concluded. They won't be able to leave the parking lot. They won't be able to leave whatever they have to go. This is going to be a static situation until this individual is taken into custody. And that may be 10 minutes. That may be hours from now. We don't know.
And is there a chance that suspect has already harmed himself in that car?
It's a possibility. We don't know. If they heard a gunshot, obviously they would be concerned. If he has another weapon, has a knife. But after going through what he went through, I wouldn't think that this individual with this no bail warrant for some serious felony charge would attempt to harm himself. And I hope there's no one else in the car. We haven't really determined if he's the only individual, but maybe there's someone else in the car. We won't know until that car's approached. But again, you see the standoff right now. This is a typical situation where you've got a car with a suspect on parole with a no bail warrant who says he has a weapon. That weapon could be any type of device that would cause injury or death, and you've got the officers at a standoff. Again, you don't have just one or two. You've got a number of officers. An additional will respond But this is the type of situation where the SWAT team is so effective to bring this to an end as quickly as possible. But again, people think that the SWAT team officers ride around waiting for the call to come out. The SWAT team is made up of officers who are specially trained, but they have to pull them off whatever detail they're at and bring the equipment, whether they have specialized equipment, and they have to roll that out to the location. So it could take a period of time until they arrive with their equipment that they can successfully use to approach that vehicle. So it doesn't happen like you'd see in the TV show where the van's running around town and all of a sudden they jump to the scene. These are all officers who are specially trained. They're on regular patrols, and they then are responding to a situation when that necessity takes place.
The time is now 4:22. We are live with breaking news coverage. This is a standoff at the end of a pursuit. This has been throughout different areas of Orange County. We are now in Newport Beach. This is a suspect who's wanted for a no-bail warrant. There is a possibility that this suspect is armed. We have heard that the suspect may be in communication with police, and the suspect pulled into this parking spot, and now we are in a standoff mode. I'm Alex Michelson, now joined by Christine Devine.
Alex, we're getting some new information on this suspect. Extensive criminal history is what we're hearing, including fraud. Dennis, as we are watching this pursuit here, I'm trying to think, has there been a long standoff in a recent memory? I'm thinking back maybe 20 years ago of a suspect who stopped a vehicle on a freeway. I think it might have even been a stolen taxi, if my memory serves me correctly. And that standoff was literally hours. Do you recall that one?
Yes, but it's interesting you mentioned that. I was recently at an event up in Northern California. I drove up Interstate 5, and I was on my way back Sunday on Interstate 5, and the big sign, the freeway's closed. It turned off, there was a suspect, 4 people in the vehicle, and there was a standoff with the Highway Patrol. They shut down the 5 freeway, and it was shut down for hours. It was the Kern County Sheriff's responded, the SWAT team, the bombs, everything. They took him into custody, but the inconvenience to the people on Interstate 5 was phenomenal. For hours, they had that. Well, this happens because what happens is you got to get them into custody, and you got to do it in a safe manner without risking your life or the life of the general public.
Obviously, this situation a little bit different in that you're not on a freeway, you're not blocking traffic, you're not stopping people from heading home after work, on a Wednesday night at rush hour. This looks to be some kind of business park near the mall there in Newport Beach. So you're not affecting a lot of people like you would on a freeway. Obviously, all those people who are in that area who want to get to their cars to perhaps go home or do some business at that location, they're certainly affected. But yeah, Alex?
And just for some perspective of where we are at 450 Newport Center Drive. The Newport Center is a shopping mall. So a Yard House is there, Edwards Theater is there, there's a Whole Food Market there. So this is a busy area. We're not far from Fashion Island Mall. And so this is an area with a lot of traffic. You see all those cars parked there, and all these folks now probably not being allowed to leave this area as all of this occurs right outside this Newport Center.
Now, as far as the technique, as far as the procedure, whether it be on Interstate 5 or here in this parking lot, it's an advantage to the general public and for the safety of the general public. It's in an isolated area. But the law enforcement will use the same procedure, the same tactic for safety of the general public, safety of the individual who's wanted, safety of the officers. And that's why they have the specialized equipment, specialized training. So they're trained to handle a situation like this. The advantage here is we're not impacting a large portion of Orange County, a large portion of a roadway. This is good that he's in an isolated area. It's good that we have sufficient units there and a standoff. So when the final units arrive, which would be, in my estimation, shortly the SWAT team, they will deploy. They'll get the plan made up. They'll deploy, bring this to an end quickly as possible. But until that, there is the standoff. So the only difference between this and on a freeway, which we've seen happening, is that the inconvenience to the general public. So we're not shutting down anything except that particular parking lot area. So if you got to get to your car, you're not going to get to your car. You have to go someplace, you're not going to go, at least in the mode of transportation that you thought you'd go. So this standoff will remain. Those units that you see parked, the police units, will remain there along with the Highway Patrol, the local agencies, and hopefully we will get the specialized equipment deployed to the scene as quickly as possible so we can bring this to an end. But there's no rush. because right now we don't have a lot of inconvenience to a lot of people. We want to get him into custody. He's not cooperating, says he has a weapon. So time is on our side. We still have a lot of hours of light, at least 4 more hours of light. So once it gets to darkness, more hazard to the officer. So within 4 hours, hopefully this will come to an end, and hopefully we will go back to normal programming. But I don't think it's going to take 4 hours to bring this to an end.
Let's hope so. So what is some of that specialized equipment, and how does it help?
Well, the specialized equipment that the SWAT team has, a lot of it's military equipment that they obtain from the military, the vehicles themselves, armored vehicles, and the SWAT team officers are specially trained, special weapons and tactics. They have special armament. They have special weapons. They have non-lethal that they can utilize. So there's a lot of equipment that the average officer in a black and white does not have at their disposal, and that's why the special equipment that the SWAT team has and the training that they go through is very specialized for barricaded suspects, for situations like this where an individual is in a car, wanted for felony, wanted for a warrant, says he's armed, and whether he said he's armed or not, they would anticipate that the individual is armed but not compliant. So if he does have a gun and he's sitting there lying in wait for the officers to approach and start shooting officers, they may have a protective vest, and that's about it. The SWAT team has all types of other equipment that they can utilize to take this individual into custody. So sophisticated, specialized equipment, some of it military style, and it's a great advantage. You don't use it every day, but a situation like this, when you need it, it's there, and that's when they would utilize it. So it's not deployed every single day, but they're trained to use it, and this is a classic situation where they will utilize that specialized equipment.
Well, Dennis, hearing that suspect is possibly armed, you look at the position there with those officers, you have to commend their courage there and the job that they do. You really see what risk that they face with that vehicle facing right at them. My question for you, as we learn more information about the suspect, that he is wanted for and has an extensive criminal history, what does that tell you perhaps about the mindset of the person that they might be dealing with here?
Doesn't want to go back to jail, doesn't want to go to prison. Whatever prison, whatever experience, does not want to go back. Obviously, continue to do something that shouldn't have been done, has a no bail warrant out. So there was some crime that was committed, investigation, got a warrant, tried to serve that warrant, and lo and behold, he doesn't want to comply. He does not want to go back, and whatever crime he committed, and it's a felony, it's a no bail, which means it's very serious when you have a no bail warrant, the individual does not want to go back to jail or go back to prison. So to try and stay out, thinking, what are my options? Well, the options are really limited now because you're in a parking lot, isolated, and they're going to come get you. So you're not going to get away. If you try and take off on foot, that's not going to happen. Again, we got a canine deployed there. That canine would be deployed quickly, take him down, take him into custody. So basically, there's no options. But his concern is, I'm sure, I don't want to go back to prison. I'll do whatever I can. But all this individual is doing is racking up more charges. So when this ultimately goes to court, the judge will look at this, all the time, all the expense, all that he has caused because he didn't want to cooperate. So whatever the no bail warrant is for, this is just compounding the matter to have more serious charges.
Time approaching 4:30 right now, and welcome to an early edition of the Fox 11 News at 5 o'clock. I'm Alex Michelson alongside Christine Devine, Dennis Zine joining us on the phone, and we are on early because of what is now a standoff. It began as a pursuit in downtown Laguna Beach. The suspect with a no bail warrant. We're not sure exactly what that means, but we suspect that it is a felony no bail warrant. Refused to yield in downtown Laguna Beach. Ended up on several Orange County freeways, ended up on several side streets, often circling the Fashion Island area in Newport Beach, ended up pulling into a parking lot near the Newport Center, and is now in a standoff. That Mercedes pointed at the officers, and right now we are in a wait-and-see game.
As we look at this location here, the exact address is 450 Newport Center Drive. This is Newport Beach. You can see that vehicle, as Alex said, pointing right there at those law enforcement officers. Dennis, you're talking about people not able to get their cars. If you're in this area, it could be a long afternoon, possibly into the evening for those folks as this investigation continues. We understand, Dennis, that earlier the suspect had been in connection with law enforcement, talking with them perhaps by cell phone, and that's where the negotiations emotions come into play, the negotiators. There's no hostage or other person in the car that we know of. So what kind of conversation goes on with police and a suspect here who really doesn't have a way out here?
Well, just common sense. You've already been to prison. You know what it's like. You don't want to go back. All you're doing is causing yourself more jeopardy and more time in prison, because whatever you did, that is going to have to be resolved. But now you're racking up more charges. So the consequence of this is going to be a greater time of incarceration. And when you're going to cause yourself more grief and more agony, and you're not going to escape, there's no way you're going to be able to escape the situation, then it's time to surrender. It's time to get out of the car, lay on the ground, spread your hands, and get taken to custody, because all you're doing is causing more grief for yourself. This is going to come to an end one way or another, but your consequence is going to determine. It's up to you to decide what you want to do. Those police are not going to go away. The canine's not going to go away. Nothing's going to go away until you decide to surrender and bring this to an end. So all you're doing is compounding the charges and the problems that you're going to be facing, because there's no escaping this situation. There's not going to be any type of plan that you can come up with. You're not going to be able to plow and go through the cars that are there blocking your path. We've got officers, canine, we've got other personnel en route. Maybe they're not saying we've got the SWAT team coming, but the fact is you've got a serious situation on your hands that you're just making it worse for yourself. And what's the advantage? Give it up, and then let's see what we can work out when you go to court. Try and just convince the individual to come to a clear mind. He may be under the influence of drugs. He may be the influence of any kind of narcotic. Again, when you have a no bail warrant, that is a very serious felony charge. Oftentimes you have a bail for a criminal charge. But when it's a no bail, it could be is very, very serious. I don't want to speculate, but it could be a very, very serious charge. And that's the consequence that this individual is facing. So all he's doing is causing himself more grief, more agony, and more deployment of personnel. And I shouldn't take that long for the next step as we see the standoff. And with this situation, when individual says he has a weapon, for the SWAT team to come in. And as you'll see, they'll come in and do what they need to do, assess the situation, and bring this to an end. But you try to convince the person your best option right now is to cooperate, get out of the car, and spread eagle and do what the officers tell you to do. Bring this to an end and not make it any worse than it already is, because you've already caused yourself a lot of grief, agony, and you're just racking up more charges. You're accumulating more problems for yourself. You're not doing any harm, any good for yourself.
Dennis, you talked about the possibility of the person being under the influence of drugs or alcohol. The way that person was driving, though, I don't think that was the perspective if you saw the way the person was driving. I mean, the streets were fairly wide open. It wasn't yet rush hour as the person drove from Laguna to Newport and around those streets there, and then parked the car here in this lot. But let's think back to when the person was actually driving the vehicle. Did you get that perspective that the person was driving under the influence?
No. It looked like the speed was appropriate, driving the pattern was appropriate. But just because you're under the influence doesn't mean you're going to be driving in a careless manner. Mm-hmm. He could be under a controlled substance, and calmed him down. He was driving in a relatively safe manner. I mean, obviously he wasn't stopping for the police. He went through stop signs, et cetera, but not excessive speed, not what you consider reckless driving. It was far from reckless driving. But not complying with the directions of the officers, but that didn't result in any kind of serious driving pattern. But what we see happening now is, why is he staying in the car when he says he has a weapon? And if they're still communicating with him, which may be the case, if his cell phone is still active, why doesn't he just get out of the car and surrender? Because he doesn't want to go back to jail. The bottom line is, he knows he's got some serious criminal charges facing, and it could be extremely serious with no bail warrant. Doesn't want to face that. And trying to figure out, what am I going to do? What are my options? And with the officer or detective who's communicating, is going to say, basically, you have no options. The only option is to surrender, because all you're going to do is create more problems for yourself, because there's no escape. This place is surrounded, and there's no way you're going to escape the situation that you're now facing, that you created by leaving when they tried to apprehend you originally on this no bail warrant.
As Skyfox pans around, you get a sense of the fact that authorities are trying to shut this neighborhood down. But if you look on the bottom left side of your screen, there are some sort of looky-loos that are gathering to try to see what's going to happen here. Clearly, they're not being allowed to leave their cars, but probably not the safest place to be. as they watch, what is happening here. We just saw a fire truck that was blocking some of the streets. We are again at 450 Newport Center Drive, and this mall area is now being shut down due to concerns about this suspect who remains barricaded inside his own car.
And that
So
go ahead, Dennis.
It's a ADW, wanted for also to assault with a deadly weapon. So obviously this individual has been involved in the criminal justice system and most likely does not want to go back. But looking at what we've seen so far, what we know is been through the criminal justice system more than one time. Fraud, which is a fraudulent charge, could be financial, etc. But then when you see ADW, someone was assaulted with a deadly weapon, including that. So you talk about extensive criminal history. If you look at the rap sheet, that's going to show a lot of arrests, a lot of convictions, and time in prison. So that's why this individual is saying, I'm not going to surrender, I'm not going to give up, take me the hard way.
Well, if you know this area, you know this location is to the east of the Newport Beach Fashion Island, the big mall in that area. This is also an area with a lot of businesses, corporations. He pulled into this parking lot here, and we have this standoff with police at Newport Center Drive, and that cross street here, let me get that for you, is San Nicolas Drive. If you're in that area, obviously an area for sure to avoid as this standoff continues. Alex, we've been on this for what, an hour?
Yeah.
An hour now, okay.
And we've been in this sort of standoff pursuit for about the last 20 minutes or so, just waiting. I mean, they can wait. They can wait as long as they need to, right? I mean, that's the advantage of the police. They can just wait them out.
They will. They will. And you see the officers have weapons pointed at the car. If he comes out firing a weapon, they will obviously return fire, but not only the sidearm, but it looks like they either have a shotgun or a rifle, one of the officers. And as we see the officers deployed to the position of advantage, as we refer to, they have a bead on that particular car, on that particular door. If he were to exit with a weapon, then he wouldn't get very far because they're going to utilize deadly force to take him into custody. If he comes out with a gun or a rifle or whatever type of weapon, if he tries to run, then they're going to tackle him. They're not going to be shooting him if he comes out of the car with his, just trying to take off on foot. They will deploy the canine. They will then go on a foot chase. But if he comes out holding a gun and starts firing, we don't want to show that because that would be a very, very gruesome scene.
There are some of our viewers that I know, because I see the comments on Facebook constantly, and right now we are live on our Facebook page. Thanks for those of you that are joining us there, that say, why don't they act more aggressively in trying to stop this? Why do they pull back?
Well, remember the premise of our laws in America, you're innocent until proven guilty. And a court of law is going to determine what this individual is guilty or not guilty. The police simply take the person into custody and let the court sort that out. So the officers are required by law to do what they're required, and that's take them into custody. They're not, unless it's a deadly force situation, if he comes out firing a weapon, then obviously they will return fire for their protection of the other officers and anyone in that area. But if he comes out with his hands up, they're not going to fire a weapon on him. They're not. They don't do that. They're not trained to that. And legally, they can't do that. They want to use minimal force. And the technology that they have, especially with the SWAT operation, with the protective equipment they have, the armament they have, the non-lethal, we have a lot of non-lethal weapons that are deployed. But if an individual is coming out with a weapon, a gun, a shotgun, a rifle, whatever the case may be, now you're talking a deadly force situation. But if he comes out and wants to run, they'll chase him. So a lot of people say, well, put this to an end real quick, just shoot him and then, forget it. That's not the way law enforcement works in America. It does not work in our standard of society.
Well, also, you talk about taking action. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of the officers there on the ground. Each and every one of those officers, they want to go home tonight. So it's about officer safety when you understand that you already have word that a suspect is there with a gun. They were driving for some time in a pursuit, obviously wanting to get away, and now staying in their car, not complying at all. I'm thinking officer safety first.
Well, sure, officer safety, but again, you have to comply with the law. The law says if he is armed and he's shooting at you, yes, is it reasonable? Is it necessary? And there's a controversy right now in Sacramento is it really necessary versus reasonable? The current standard of reasonable, they want to extend that to necessary. So they don't want to use deadly force unless it's the last resort. In this particular case, the individual, we know from the information that they've received, and it's what they know at that particular moment, that there's a no bail warrant. He's been through prison. He says he has a weapon, and you would assume that weapon's a gun. So he's really in an awkward position to try and say, I'm a good citizen just driving down the street being harassed by the police. He's obviously done a lot of things to get to the point. If he's been to prison multiple times, whatever crimes he's been involved in, and now you have a no bail warrant along with his criminal history. So he's been there. He obviously doesn't want to go back. But the officers are compelled to comply with the law and do it in a lawful manner. And while there's frustration, there's anxiety, we see the officers have their ballistic vests on. This is what they do to protect themselves in the event of gunfire. But the way they deploy is to make sure that they're covered. They're behind a vehicle with a ballistic panel. They've got bulletproof vests. They're protecting themselves. But if he comes out wildly shooting, everybody's in jeopardy. But again, you have enough personnel there that would neutralize the situation as quickly as possible. Hopefully he won't do that. Hopefully he'll just go to jail and go back to the criminal justice system one more time.
Clearly, he doesn't want to do that. Part of the reason for this standoff that we're now seeing, you see officers talking to each other, trying to figure out their strategy of where to go next, what to do next. You see them with bulletproof vests on, and you see them, it looks like they're motioning to each other. Maybe they're going to move in. Okay, so now we see, it looks like possibly some SWAT officers have arrived, or you see folks in getting
the
ready.
green?
Yeah. Is that proof? Is that a SWAT officer?
It should be. Yeah, you've got officers there that the ones in Levi's, those aren't patrol officers, so they're probably part of the SWAT team. And you find them coming in and taking over. We've now seen some movement taking place, but you see the officers in plain clothes with the weapons, that probably part of the SWAT team element that they have down in Orange County.
So, Dennis, already from the pursuit that started in Laguna to this standoff here in Newport, what kind of charges is this suspect facing? I mean, right now, we've been just sitting here for a bit of time. I don't know what additional charges happens when you're just sitting there like this, but run down some of the charges the suspect's facing.
Well, the charges are the original, the no bail warrant. There's a no bail warrant for whatever charge prompted that. As far as the pursuit, there'll be vehicle code charges regarding the pursuit. The standoff, there's really no charge. He's not cooperating. 148, obstructing, resisting the police officer in the performance of their duty. So 148 would be tacked on. There'll be a number of violations tacked on, but the criminal violations, the felonies, the real serious ones, but what they do is they add everything to it. So when it goes to court, and the police are probably tape recording the news coverage that we see happening, that'll all be introduced in evidence. So what the judge will see, if this goes through a jury trial, they'll see exactly what happened. So when they find guilty, then this is all part of that. So instead of getting 2 years, you get 5, 6, 7, 10 years, whatever time you're going to get, to take you out of society because you become a hazard, you become a person who obviously can't exist in a society where you have the freedoms. So your freedom is taken away, you'll be incarcerated for whatever time, but this all tacks on to that original no bail warrant. This is just compounding what the original charge is by not cooperating. So you've got all types of criminal charges that add to that. It looks like that is the SWAT vehicle.
Right.
Yeah, that Bearcat vehicle, right? That's a Bearcat, right, Dennis?
Yes, that's the Bearcat.
And so what does that give them the ability to do?
Well, that gives them all types of equipment. And again, the personnel, and that's what I was mentioning earlier when the standoff took place, is they'd be requesting the SWAT team. The Bearcat has sophisticated equipment, extra equipment. It's got the personnel who are trained. They're all trained members of the SWAT team. There may be multiple jurisdictions working together. They can approach that vehicle. They can extricate the individual from that vehicle. So it'll be interesting to see how they deploy this vehicle. But this vehicle is specifically designed with armor-piercing bullets won't go through. So it's highly technology, and it's highly sophisticated. It's basically what they use in the military to protect our military personnel. So they have a plan. They'll deploy it, and they'll utilize that to take him into custody.
Yeah, we should also note the Bearcat's credited with saving the lives of officers in these kinds of possible armed confrontations. We understand a suspect here has identified that he is armed in communication with police. So this is a situation where you have this armored vehicle that's been able to come to this location now to step up the game. I mean, if you're the suspect there and you are seeing this kind of vehicle come in, you got to know it's serious. Law enforcement has stepped up the message they're sending as well, as we also look at this ground shot of officers there on the ground. Dennis?
And exactly. And what we have is the specialized equipment. There's been some controversy from some people that say, well, do they really need this military-type equipment? Well, this is a classic situation where you need this military-type equipment to protect the officers, take the suspect into custody, and protect the general public. The officers going in with a bulletproof vest and with their sidearm is not sufficient if this individual is not cooperating, and he does have a weapon that could be considered lethal. I'm talking about anything from a pistol to a shotgun to a rifle. So you need to have this equipment. While they don't use it every day, it's just like a fire truck. You don't use a fire truck every day, but when you have a fire, you need the fire truck. Law enforcement needs these type of military vehicles to utilize in this type of situation where you have a barricaded suspect. I was at the North Hollywood shootout many years ago, and I can clearly remember that they borrowed a Brinks armored truck to rescue officers who'd been shot. So after that, they decided, you know what, maybe we need some sophisticated equipment to protect society, and that's exactly what we see with the Bearcat. LAPD, most agencies have a SWAT team with the Bearcat or similar type equipment to deploy in these situations. So they mustered up the SWAT team component. They now have the opportunity to bring this to an end. They're on site. And they've mustered up their personnel for that particular purpose. So it wouldn't be surprised if that vehicle got closer to the suspect's vehicle, extricate him. Again, they've got everything that they need in that vehicle. They don't need anything else other than that vehicle and the personnel and the training to take this individual into custody in a successful manner. And hopefully no one gets harmed in the process.
So I'm looking, Dennis, at these vehicles here. They said OCSD, Orange County Sheriff's Department. With that Bearcat, would that also be property of Orange County Sheriff's Department?
I would assume it's with the Sheriff's Department. I'm not sure, but I know the Sheriff's Department does have a Bearcat. Most agencies, even smaller agencies, now have them, and oftentimes they get them from the government. They're comes from the military, but they use them overseas. But for civilian law enforcement use, it's a wonderful tool when you need it. And my comparison is, you don't need a fire truck every day, but when you have a fire, you need a fire truck. So it's the same kind of situation. So that is a vehicle that's not deployed all the time, but when you need it, as this particular case shows, because those officers approaching that vehicle on foot with their uniforms and the sophisticated equipment that they don't have versus what the SWAT team has. I'm talking about the black and white units and the equipment that they have at their disposal versus what the SWAT team has. Much more sophisticated, again, to protect the officers, protect the general public, and to take the suspect into custody in a safe manner so that they can take him to jail without causing any harm, injury to anyone.
So we're now getting a bit of a different perspective from the ground. One of our Fox 11 news crews have arrived, and they are on the roof of that parking garage where we have seen some looky-loos, where we have seen some police officers, and you can see that they're now following what's happening here as well as us. As you can imagine, they're being kept away a bit because of the very dangerous nature of what's happening here, or the potential of what's happening here. But it is a different perspective on what we've been looking at. So what's the process now? So SWAT's there, and we've got the Bearcat, which has been the kind of thing that you would see in Iraq or Afghanistan. Where do we go from here?
Well, they've got a tactical plan. They'll deploy the tactical plan. They'll have the ground units aware of what they're going to be doing and have them as backup to keep the general public away. And they've got a game plan on how they're going to get him out of the car. So they've surveyed the area. They know exactly what they have to deal with. If they know what type of weapon the individual has, or if he does not have a weapon. But again, he said he has a weapon, so they can assume anything from a pistol to a rifle to an automatic weapon. And they will then brief the ground units, and they will then maintain that perimeter. They will then go in with their technique, their technology, their equipment, and either break the windows, whatever they do to get him out of the car, and they'll get him out of that car, take him into custody.
So you have this suspect vehicle in this pretty wide open parking lot. Obviously, the cars are around. The concern would be any pedestrians, people in that area using those businesses. So you have police, I assume, in the perimeter who've made sure that no one can enter that area. And they've
Right.
And it looked like as well that we just saw some first responders that are there just in case as well, ready to help administer aid if needed.
Well, you'll probably get a fire unit, a paramedic. Normally, a paramedic would be responding to the situation.
So now the Bearcat is on the
Yep.
Dennis. Now the Bearcat is on the move. So we're seeing this Bearcat move into place. Unclear where it's gonna. Looks like it's turning into position, and we wonder if it is now going to engage with this suspect.
Well, it's going to. They've developed a plan. They got a tactical plan. They'll deploy that plan. They've had some time to develop that, and as we'll see unfold exactly what they do to make that entry.
Are they going to approach it from behind? It looks like the car may be approaching from behind.
It's hard to tell what they're going to do.
So here it comes, and by the way, it does say police on it, which makes you think that maybe this is not Orange County Sheriff's Department.
Might be one of the local agencies.
So the
Laguna.
Bearcat now moving in place. It is now getting right behind that suspect's vehicle with all sorts of abilities to act. The question is, what exactly are they going to do here? But now sort of the moment of truth for this suspect.
So is that the suspect vehicle right there to the left of the
Yes,
screen?
yes.
All right, so that Bearcat parking or positioning behind the vehicle directly, sending that message that car isn't going backwards in any way, shape, or form. You have the law enforcement vehicles to the front of the car as well. So it certainly sends, Dennis, a powerful message there. If I'm that suspect sitting in that car, a message certainly has been sent of presence.
Yes, it has. And you might see the turret on top. You may see that open. They are lining it up. That turret that you see on top, you may see that open any moment now. They're going to deploy from there. But they're definitely in the position of advantage now to deploy and to apprehend the individual, whether they're going to pop out the windows or whatever they're going to do. They do have their tactical plan. I do not know exactly what it is, but the bottom line is they're there to end this and take this individual into custody, and we'll see how that unfolds.
So this suspect is now boxed in. He's got a Bearcat behind him, and he's got other officers in front of him, really nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. And the question is, will he give up voluntarily, or will he try to fight with officers? And if he does fight with officers, he is not in a good position to do that.
And as you'll notice, there is a canine on site, at least one canine. So virtually, there's nowhere to go. The only way out is to surrender or to be taken into custody through the use of minimal force. And that's what they want to emphasize is minimal force. I know a lot of people are watching this. A lot of people have different opinions. The bottom line is these officers are trained. They're professional. They take them into custody in a lawful manner, utilizing minimal force. And that's the technique, and that's the procedure, and that's what they follow.
If people are just joining us, perhaps, or looking at this location, wondering exactly where it is in Newport Beach, east of Newport Center Drive, south of San Nicolas Drive, and to the north of San Miguel Drive. You might know the area from the shopping mall in Newport Beach, and that is to the east of this location here. Not far away, though. Certainly walking distance to some of those shops in that shopping area.
We're at 450 Newport Center Drive is the exact address, a place that is a shopping area. There's a Yard House there, an Edwards Theater, a Whole Foods. This is an area that is frequented by traffic, and you see all those cars that are now parked there, people are not allowed to leave this area as we wait what could be a confrontation between law enforcement and this suspect.
Okay, doors opening. Dennis, we are seeing the doors of the suspect opening right now. That driver has opened the doors of that vehicle. We'll see if there's any movement from the hands. We do have a wider shot here because we do know this suspect had a weapon.
So the suspect is getting out.
On the ground. All right, he is complying now, Dennis. If you can see this shot here, suspect's arms are out. He is complying with law enforcement. We'll see
Okay.
if he. Go ahead.
We're seeing on the broadcast now. We're seeing just the door just open, so we're a little bit behind you.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and paint the picture here. Suspect is still there on the ground. Arms are out, feet are crossed at the bottom. You can see that has probably been an order by law enforcement to cross those feet there. They want to make sure he does not get up easily and run. Hard to see if any law enforcement personnel have attempted to move in just yet.
We do not see any sign of a weapon, at least not yet.
And that would be the big concern.
And we do not see any signs that there's anybody else in that vehicle.
See, if he put the weapon in the car, they wouldn't be surprised. He's not foolish to come out with a weapon in his hand. So the weapon, if there is one, under the
Dennis,
seat.
They're moving in now. Law enforcement is moving in. They have their protection there. You see several of them there watching each other's backs in case this person does make a move and does have that weapon. He is complying completely. Okay, you see law enforcement right there going in to make that arrest. Alex?
So the good news is that this ends peacefully, it appears, that nobody was hurt in the course of this pursuit, and nobody was hurt in the apprehension of this suspect. It looks like the suspect is now in custody. The SWAT battering vehicle was not needed. Maybe the presence itself was needed, but we never saw any officers get out of that vehicle. Maybe it just simply being there was the incentive and the impetus to get this suspect to finally come out of his vehicle after some 45 minutes or so.
Well, there may be.
Does he have shoes on? Looks like he may be barefoot.
Socks, maybe?
Some of those officers may be part of the SWAT team that you see taking him into custody with the Levi's and the vest. They may be part of the SWAT team.
Well, Dennis, this is how you had hoped it would end, with the suspect eventually surrendering. No force by law enforcement there, just a mere presence. So I would think you're thinking, job well done by law enforcement.
Well, as we say, they're professionals. They know what they do. They have the equipment to do it right. That Bearcat showing up obviously had some impact, but I believe there were SWAT officers there prior to the Bearcat. So they've taken him into custody. He's now into custody. He's going to go get booked. Additional charges will be brought against him. He'll have to go to court, answer the original charge plus this. So that's where we go.
All right.
So it's another code 4 suspects in custody. So here we end another happy capture of a suspect wanted.
Well, that is definitely good news. And Dennis, we thank you for your perspective as well. Really invaluable in explaining what was going on here and adding your perspective as a former member of the LAPD. Dennis Zine, thank you very much. And the good news is this pursuit is now wrapped up. And
we say former, he is still a reserve member of LAPD and law enforcement, so we appreciate his perspective there.
And his service.
Yeah. All right, Dennis Zine, thank you much. All right, welcome everyone to the Fox 11 5 o'clock news. We begin our newscast now. I'm Christine Devine.
I'm Alex Michelson. Thousands of activists, along with union members and members of the community, are marching through downtown LA this afternoon in the annual May Day procession.
Susan here as soon as live at MacArthur Park with more. Susan?
We just left the park, Christine and Alex, and the march is slowly making its way